the Kalkin personality. We have to become more and more conscious each time of the work that we are carrying out. It is fundamental to know the difference that exists between the Gnostic movement and all the other pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist organizations that there are. Above all else, we have to know how to situate ourselves, how to center ourselves if we want to comprehend the work that we should carry out. If we take a general look at the different schools which presently exist in the world, all of a pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist nature, we easily get to discover their origin. On one occasion, there occurred in Rome the case of a nun who constantly fell into a hypnotic trance. She had a confessor, and with him she had to clarify the causa causarum of those fatal trances. Before all else, the confessor managed to know that she had had a lover and that although she was cloistered, she kept a photograph of her lover. The confessor made her bring it, and suddenly he realized that by merely looking at that picture she fell into a trance. That confessor resolved to be assessed by a psychologist, and they subjected the nun to psychic experiments. They were then able to evince that it was not the photograph of that man which put her in a trance state, but rather some very brilliant stones which were on the picture frame. The investigations continued, and very soon it was possible to conclude, as a consequence or corollary, that all types of brilliant objects predispose to hypnotic states. As a result, practically an entire school was derived. They were able to verify that by means of hypnotic states it would be possible to modify in some way the psychological states of patients, and it was thereby resolved to utilize hypnosis to cure patients or sick persons. This is how the famous medical hypnotists were born. It was then that many followers of hypnology, catalepsy, mediumship, etc. made their appearance in the world. It is not superfluous to remember Richard Charcot, Louise Uribe, Cesar Lombroso, Camille Flammarion, etc. with certain emphasis. In that school of hypnotists, the ones who especially stood out were an Englishman whose name I do not recall in these precise instants, and the famous Charcot. As far as the former is concerned, he had all the properties of a Hanushushan. The latter, referring to Charcot, there was no doubt that he was Mommy's baby. His experiments were noteworthy, but since he was the baby, the spoiled child of the family, everything that he did was a marvel. Well, if I mention all of these passages in a general manner, and experiments of magnetism, hypnology, catalepsy, spiritism, and 50,000 things of the sort, it is with a single purpose to make you see where the different schools of a pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist type of this dark age of Kali Yuga came from. In those times of the young ladies Fox de Merville, who managed to serve as instruments for the materialization of the famous Katie King, a phantom that lasted 3 consecutive years, materializing herself before the eyes of different scientists of the entire world, in those days of Eusapia Palladino of Naples, in which all of Europe became agitated with psychic phenomena. This was when Theosophism of an Oriental type appeared. And of course, you know it, everyone who has visited those organizations knows that in the aforementioned school there is always a mixture of spiritism with theories of a Hindu type. Theosophism has never been free of the spiritualistic phenomena. When we know the origin of the different organizations which presently exist, it cannot surprise us in any way that Theosophism is mixed with some mediumship. That Theosophists become frightened before Tantrism is normal, because it is not a school of an esoteric type, but rather of a pseudo-occultist type and nothing more. Unquestionably, many branches or organizations, let's call them pseudo-Rosicrucianism, pseudo-yogism, etc., had to branch off, and they did so, as is natural, from that school of hypnotists. They are so innumerable that we would need to consult a dictionary to know all their names. But let us get to the bottom of this matter. What is the foundation of such schools? The dogma of evolution. Where did such touted dogma come from? From a Mr. Darwin. It seems incredible that Mr. Darwin has put into his pocket many eminent figures, many esoterist, pseudo-esoterist investigators, and many sincere aspirants. But that is how it happened. We cannot deny it. The concept about reincarnation, which was created by pseudo-esoteric organizations in the Western world, is false. Lord Krishna never said that all human beings reincarnated. He said that only the Buddhas, the gods, the solar heroes, had the right to reincarnation. The rest of us are subjected to the law of the eternal return of all things. That is clear. It was also never said in the Orient that all humanoid beings possess the superior existential bodies of the being. But it was easy for the schools of a pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist type to make humanity believe that the entire world already possesses such superior vehicles. In this manner, they have no inconvenience in talking about the subject the septenary of man with such certainty that it seems as if all humanoids truly possess that entire set of vehicles. Well, the result of the species of morbidity, disseminated throughout the Western world, from these schools of a subjective, incoherent, vague and indefinite type has been the Kalyan personality, in other words, the personality that is characteristic of this age of Kali Yuga. Kalyan personalities are disrespectful, irreverent. This type of personality from pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist schools have lost not only the sense of authentic devotion and of true religiosity but also that of veneration for the ancient patriarchs. In this manner, humanity, having been able to be directed by truly wise religions, has degenerated in its ridiculous pedantry, thus forming the Kalyan personality. It is convenient to know how to confront a Kalyan personality with an authentically esoterist personality. What is the difference? The Kalyan personality is full of pedantries, bottled up in the dogma of evolution, misinformed about the internal constitution of man. He ignores the tantric mysteries. He fears the development of the igneous serpent in the spinal column, and besides, the fact of being stuffed with theories produces in him a feeling of self-sufficiency. Unquestionably, the Kalyan personality is a victim of self-deceit. He believes that he has achieved everything when he has achieved nothing, and what is worse is that he has lost the sense of veneration. He has forgotten the true and authentic religiosity. He has also lost humility before the creating logos. This is the Kalyan personality. We cannot walk on the path of the Kalyan personality. We cannot accept those false dogmas such as evolution, such as that of believing that all humanoids are perfect, complete men with their existential bodies, such as fearing the igneous serpent of our magical powers and the lived experience, etc. We prefer instead to follow the path of authentic wisdom, the path of the tantras, that of the dissolution of the ego and that of the recognition of our own misery and incapacity. We prefer to recognize that we are nothing, that we are only miserable worms in the mud. We are concerned, yes, to work in ourselves, upon ourselves. We want the dissolution of our myself, of the one-self. We use the intelligent power of the creative energy. We work in the forge of the Cyclops, which frightened pseudo-esoterists and pseudo-occultists so much. We are, therefore, on a different 100% revolutionary path, and which nonetheless has a frightening antiquity which is lost in the unbearable night of all ages. Certainly, the characteristics of the Kalyan personality are unmistakable. Before everything else, the self-sufficiency and the terrible pride and the frightening vanity based on theories. We see, for example, in the schools of psychoanalysis, parapsycho, etc., what terrible pride and self-sufficiency seize those people with true Kalyan personalities. They stand out not only in certain groups but they also appear on television, they appear in the press, on radio, and have the entire world completely poisoned with a type of vibrations which in esotericism is called the neo-Oscarian. They have complete self-sufficiency. They look at the people of the Middle Ages with disdain. They think that they are super-civilized. They believe that they have arrived at the non-plus-ultra of wisdom. Such is their pride that they plan to conquer the infinite, outer space. They laugh at what they consider to be superstitions of the medieval sages. There you have the subject with a Kalyan personality. And how does one make those Kalyan personalities comprehend that they are mistaken? It would not be sufficient to simply tell them, for they will deny it. Isn't that true? Since those Kalyan personalities have mastery over reasoning and that is their combat weapon, their little battle horse, well, we have to lead them to comprehend what the reasoning process is. We have to make those self-sufficient and proud people know that Immanuel Kant, the philosopher of Königsberg, the great German thinker, wrote a book called The Critique of Pure Reason, as well as The Critique of Practical Reason. If we study Immanuel Kant, we will see how he deciphers us, not only in his prosyllogisms, episyllogisms and syllogisms, but also in the manner how he analyzes the concepts of contents in The Critique of Pure Reason. It is clear that through external sensory perceptions we inform the mind, then, the latter elaborates its concepts of contents based, precisely, on the rustic sensorial connections, and because of that, it is circumscribed only by the data provided by the senses. Therefore, what can the subjective reason know about intuitions, and about ideas a priori, and about that which escapes the concepts of contents based only on external sensory perceptions? Nothing. Isn't that so? There exists another type of reason which the Kantian personality absolutely ignores. I wish to emphatically refer to objective reason. Obviously, the latter has as its foundation the data of the conscience, and it is with such data with which it functions. In authentic esotericism, the conscience is called zoistat. Objective reason was developed before the Greco-Roman period emerged. The primitive Aryans of the first subrace of the great Aryan race which flourished in Central Asia had it developed. The people of the second subrace prior to the period of the solar riches possessed it. The Egyptians of the ancient dynasties of the pharaohs, the Babylonians, the sages of Afghanistan, Turkestan and Iraq also used it and concluded, practically, with Greek reasoning. The Greeks were the ones who, beginning to play with words, ended up by establishing the subjective reason based on external sensory perceptions, drowning the objective reason, eliminating it from the face of the earth. Ever since then, humanity only possesses the subjective reason, external sensory perceptions, the data provided by the senses. The concepts of contents are based on the sensorial connections, etc., and subjective reason can know nothing about that which escapes the aforementioned factors. The sensualistic subjective reason can know nothing about what is real, the divine, about the mysteries of life and death, etc. It is completely ignorant of all that which escapes its sphere of action, the five deficient senses. Unquestionably, the powers of the heart exist, those qualities which are much beyond the intellect and its purely reasoning process, and which the sensualistic subjective reason knows nothing of. In the sacred land of the Vedas there is an old manuscript which says the following: the one who meditates on the heart center will achieve control over the Vayud Tattva, the etheric principle of air, and will also acquire the siddhis, the powers of the saints. In these moments there comes to my memory the case of Joseph of Cupertino. They say that he elevated himself into the air 70 times in this magical occurrence, which happened around 1650, with the reason why he was canonized. It is indubitable that he had the heart center developed. When a cardinal interrogated him, he told him, "Well, why is it that you clamor at the moment that you are going to rise while in prayer?" He then answered, "The gunpowder, when ignited in the heart, explodes with a great noise. The same thing occurs to the heart which is inflamed by divine love." So, in a practical manner, Joseph of Cupertino gave the clue of the jinn state. The heart is what we have to develop in order to be able to achieve the jinn states. Christina, the extraordinary saint, constantly levitated. Once dead, it was believed that she was dead. They were going to bury her, and suddenly, from within the coffin, she arose, floating all the way to the bell tower of the church. We could continue narrating innumerable cases. Surely, that of Francis of Assisi, the good brother who took care of him brought him food, and the monk was already in levitation, floating in the atmosphere. On other occasions, the good brother could not manage to give him the food because he could not reach him. Francis of Assisi was already too high, to such a degree that sometimes he would disappear into a grove nearby. Poor Mesmer, he was ridiculed very much in his time, and they continued ridiculing him. Criticism was raised against him, and they still continue criticizing him in the present. Many texts of hypnotism begin by talking against Mesmer. Hypnotists hate him because he precisely pronounced himself against that false conscience. He discovered that a double conscience existed, the false and the true conscience. Mesmer came to unmask the false conscience before the solemn verdict of public opinion, and it is clear that they almost swallowed him. That is the crude reality of facts. Well, in order to not deviate so much from the subject, what I want to say is that inner development is only achieved by endeavoring to throw the false conscience into the trash and pay attention to the true conscience, the authentic conscience. What is understood by false conscience? That which they have formed for us from the time we were born, that which was created with examples, with the precepts of all of our relatives, that which they formed for us in school, in secondary school, etc. That which was formed with all the social prejudices that exist and shall exist. We have to throw all of that into the bottom of the trash and cause the true conscience to come to the surface in order for it to work. This indicates that one must become a child in order to work, to become an infant, a baby, at the moment of working, stripped of theories and putting the true wisdom into play. In this manner, therefore, I have written this chapter with the purpose that we may center ourselves, that we recognize the situation in which we are in this world, that we understand that we do not march on the path of all the little schools, sects and orders which form the Kantian personality. That we are different, that is all.